2000. The interest rate was 9%. It was amortized over 30 years, 360. It was due in 60. That means we have a 5-year balloon, right? I put the position of the note, and just as an aside, if it's not in first position, is it worth anything?
No.
Almost never. In very rare circumstances is a second position note worth anything. Okay, then I put what the monthly payment is, when the first payment was received, and in this column you can see that number of payments received as of 4/15, so I had to go back and recreate. Do you guys have programs that do amortizations and things? Does anyone have p-value?
No, just what I find on the web.
Right. Okay. So it's a little bit limiting, but there are some better. What do you use, Franklin?
I use one of the mortgage calculators. I'd have it saved on my favorites. I can pull it up if you like, but I use just one on the web that allows you to enter the numbers and then just create an amortization schedule. But you can't really play around with it. It's just plug in the numbers.
Yeah, like you can't really say, okay, on this date interest rate changed and everything, right?
No, you can't do none of that stuff.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, you have to recreate everything. So then, okay, 69 payments. In this situation, it was, see, they'd already received 9 payments more than the 60 balloon, right? So payments remaining, 0, because the balloon is overdue. In this case, they had an extension, agreed to extend the balloon, the loan modification, and that doesn't really add to the value of the note. That makes everybody really nervous, right? Because they're going, this person can't refinance or something, right?
Right.
Balloon amount and payment history assumed current. Payers were given a 1-year extension. So any comments that are relevant, it must be assumed that this note will have to fully amortize or default, and there are 2 junior liens recorded. Just knowing that, does that tell you a story?
Yes. They're borrowing money against the property?
Yeah, they're like scrambling. They can't pay the balloon, and now they're borrowing more money. So does this make you feel good? If you were buying this note, does it make you feel like it's a solid thing, or you most likely end up foreclosing or totally restructuring the note, right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so present value approach. Now this is with the attorney group that I first worked with. I was really lucky to work with them, but we just went back and forth, and there's a lot. Basically, this is a mini course in notes is what we've included here. So present value approach, and it's just language that most of this you can just kind of copy and paste. So what I did is the stuff that stays the same on every single appraisal I left in black, and the stuff that's unique to the note that I'm talking about is in blue. And that way it's really easy to just copy and paste things. So you guys can read that. So the degree of safety, the things that I want to talk about is what we started to do earlier, but we just couldn't get the screen sharing to work very well. All right. Here's what protective equity. The cash down payment made at the time of purchase represents the hard equity. That's not soft equity. It's hard equity, most important in determining the safety of a note. The less protective equity available, the less valuable the note is. So then I go, well, based on that principle in the note business, how does this note stack up? Investors usually like to see a minimum of 25% down on a commercial note. These days, it's more like 35%, right? On this transaction, the borrower only put down 12%, which reduces the value of the note, right? Because the guy has less skin in the game. The more money you put down up front, the less likely you're going to walk away when things get tight. Appreciation has created additional protective equity, but is not as valuable as hard equity. As the property seems to be increasingly encumbered, meaning there's more liens on it, it seems likely that a default may be forthcoming, but there is adequate protective equity. Okay, so I also cover myself saying a potential note buyer will always get an appraisal to establish the fair value. value of securing the note. However, it's important to remember the equity provided through appreciation is significant, but it's not as important as hard equity. So even if you have a note that's 10 years old, if that was a 0% down, even with all of that payment history, it's still not considered as strong as someone who put down 10%. Does that make sense, or does that shock anybody?
After so many years, wouldn't it almost equal itself out as if they put a down payment?
Maybe to some people, but still, right now, in fact, this week, yesterday, I had a note with 9 years of seasoning, but the initial down payment was still important in depending if they would quote it and how much they would pay. Because that shows in the beginning what the investment and the emotional investment is in that property, because some people, they can pay, if they had 0% down, they may not be paying much more than rent on that note. Do you see what I mean? They could easily walk away in some instances. I know people paying less in P&I on a privately held mortgage than they would have to pay renting a similar property. So they don't have really the investment, and a note buyer is going to care about that. So initial down payment is really super, super important, and sometimes we can get over it with tons of seasoning, but still.
That down payment is not transferred. How does that down payment come into play in terms of cash for the seller? I hope I'm phrasing this correctly, but the down payment just comes into play to determine how much skin the homeowner has in the property for the buyer.
Yeah, because what you're really thinking is how likely is it that these payments are going to continue? Because if they're really statistically likely to continue, then you can pay more for the note. If you feel like there's a significant chance of default, then you have to bid it knowing that you'll have to go through the cost and time of foreclosure.
Okay.
Or you're going to have to modify the loan, and instead of getting paid off in 4 years, maybe you have to extend to 14 years. That reduces your return substantially.
Okay.
Okay. A potential, then I always say no appraisal was performed in conjunction with this valuation. That's a way of covering myself so that, hey, you didn't do an appraisal on the property, so this is my best guess. That's basically what I'm saying. Okay, credit score, after protective equity, credit score is one of the next most important things. The cutoff score is different for different buyers. Some buyers will go in the low 500s, and others say 600 is my cutoff. Others say 620 is kind of a median range. Some need a minimum of 650 for their highest bidding, or to bid it all. So, but just to know, I put the sort of the median range of 620 in there. So do you pay more for a note that has a low credit score or less?
Less.
Less, because it's more likely that I'm going to have a problem. The more sure I am that I'm just going to receive the payments without a hitch, just like if I had a CD in the bank and I was just collecting payments, then the more I'll pay for the note, the less of a return I need. Okay, so in this case, the credit score of the payer on this note is unknown. Accordingly, no discount was taken for this factor. However, the payer's inability to pay off the balloon suggests that his credit is not optimal. So I'm just trying to paint a picture for anyone who knows nothing about notes. I'm creating a picture of why there's upward or downward pressure on note. Seasoning. A note's considered seasoned when it has received 12 payments. As of 4/15/07, this note had received 69 payments, which is adequate seasoning, but past the balloon due date, which reduces the value note. So now we have, even though he has 69 months of seasoning, it doesn't mean all that much now that he's passed his balloon, because we don't know if he can perform. Payment history, obviously if they have 30-day late, 60-day late, or missed payments, the value of the note goes down. Usually they just say, assume it was current. The note was reported to be paid on time each month, but no documentation was provided.
Dawn, I'm sorry, I have a question. My apologies.
Sure.
For interrupting. If, for example, the owner of the property got into the property as a lease to purchase, would that, and for example, they used the first 12 months of payments or a portion of it as a down payment, would that significantly affect the value of the note if that's the way they came up with a down payment?
Meaning, like they paid, let's say, they spread a $10,000 down payment over 12 months?
Yeah, so for example, they paid $1,000 a month and $500 or $600, $700, whatever amount went towards the down payment, and after a year you closed on the on the note and used portion of that that money that they paid towards the down payment.
It could work that way, but it has to be worth, like, let's say if a normal payment is $700 and you're just saying, well, so they pay $700 a month, and you're just going, okay, just out of the goodness of my heart, I'm going to give you 50% of this towards your down payment. That's not going to be, and then their payment after that is $700 a month. It has to look like they come out of pocket more than average. Like, let's say I'm gonna need a $10,000 down payment, but I'll let you pay $800 a month for the next year to come up with it. But that's above and beyond like a typical and normal rent. Do you see what I mean?
Right. I guess my question is, would that hurt? Would you add that to a report? That's the way they came up with a down payment?
Definitely. I would put that under additional considerations. I would say, or that would also go. I would probably mention it in two places. I would mention it here in protective equity. While the down payment, at closing was only this, over the course of a year, they had a graduated down payment. They paid an extra $5,000-$8,000 a month for 12 months. So collectively over a year they came up with this down payment. Yes, that does help quite a bit.
And would that hurt the value of the note if you were looking at it?
Not necessarily. If you can see in the beginning they put above and beyond what their normal monthly obligation would normally be, then that is considered pretty close to the same in most instances. But you can't say, oh, they paid their normal amount and I just gave them half of it back as a down payment. That doesn't show they have any skin in the game because they didn't come out with extra money out of pocket.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, we're just trying to get into the mentality of the payer and see, are they likely to keep paying or am I likely to have a problem?
Okay.
Okay, and then we have a balloon. Notes with balloons are considered riskier than fully amortizing notes unless there is a clear and obvious exit strategy. The available of affordable conventional financing is crucial. So that's why balloons used to increase the value of a note because you would get your money back sooner. But these days, nobody thinks anyone's going to be able to refinance a balloon. So they're less valuable now. They're considered a liability. Some people won't even touch them. Okay, so then as the payer on this one missed both the original balloon payment due as well as the extension date, this appears to be a high-risk note. Let's see, a buyer would assume that the note may have to amortize over the full 30 years. So if he's past the balloon and I buy this note, I got two choices. I'm either going to foreclose and take the property back, or I'm going to have to restructure and modify the loan, which means I'm going to extend that, if I have to amortize this over 30 years and then remember in the beginning, time value of money, that means for a really, really long time, I'm not going to get my money back. So if I bought this going, I'm going to get my balloon payment 2 years from now, and instead I have to amortize over 30 years, my return could go from 15% to 4% really fast. You see, like if I bought this note going, all my money's coming back in 2 years and I don't get it all back for 30, can you see how much of a difference that could make? That makes sense intuitively?
Right. So would you go into this one discounting it, as deep as you could, thinking you're probably going to have to extend it for 30 years?
Yeah, so what I would do, I would pretend that I had to amortize it, and I'd figure out what the monthly payment would be based on a 30-year unless I knew I wanted to foreclose. Then I would just make the price of what I would pay, to basically foreclose on this property. But if I knew, then I would make a pretend payment and go, okay, he's going to only be paying me $9.92 a month for the next 30 years. I still need my 12% return, so how much can I pay for this note? Even though it technically looks like it has a short-term balloon, I would buy it as if it's being amortized out 10, 20, 30 years.
Right.
Okay. And then there's all sorts of additional considerations. This one, so now when you get the title report and then you get, sales history and you get mortgage history and different things like that, then you can really tell the story of what's happening with this note. And those things, they seem like they're not important, but they really are. And so I take the trouble to just say, here's what's going on with this note. It changed hands to this person, then they did a wrap by this person, and then they subordinated so they could get another loan from this person. Then you can see that they changed hands, and then, it just tells the story. And if I see anything that looks really weird, I point it out. I can't tell whether or not it matters, but what I want to do is just show that I did every possible due diligence on my side to identify issues that affect the note or the property. So that's what I use this area for. Sometimes on a really clean note, I don't even have this in here. But a lot of times you'll have little extra things that you'll notice when you look. When you look and you think, especially most of you have bought and sold property for yourself, you think. Don't go like, oh, how do you do this certain thing? Based on who you are and what you've done up to this point in your life, you're going to know if you see something weird, because you all know if you would see something weird and you're going to buy a property, you would ask questions about it, or things like that. So I want you to just get the mindset of basically overall things that affect this, but trust yourself to be able to think.